And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight the Hoosiers were dominant in beating Creighton 86-65 in Bloomington. Indiana showed the offense. They showed the defense. It was perhaps the most complete 40 minutes that Indiana has played on this short season, especially given the opponent, the step up in competition, and we are going to break it all down for you on tonight's episode of the Assembly Call. I am your host, Jared Morris. I will be joined tonight by Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. Will DeWitt is not here, but we will try to pick up his slack, giving you the important numbers on this game. And before we get into this, I do want to mention real quick, for any of you who are new to the show, we send out a post-game email after every single game, which includes my thoughts on it, Will's stat of the night, Andy's analysis. Ryan, we don't have anything from you in the post-game in the post-game email. We may need to get something now that you actually have a computer. But we want you to get on that list. We only send it to subscribers, so go to assemblycall.com/subscribe and join that free email list. Over 1,300 IU fans just like you are on it, so make sure that you join it. All right, let's go around the horn, get some opening comments. I will start, as I always do, with the banner moment. And tonight, it really boils down to the defense, both in the big picture and something specific. And I'm going to talk about both. You know, you look at Indiana. This Creighton team is a solid offensive team. They've always been pretty good offensively under Coach McDermott. Well, we've seen Indiana, even last year, turn in good defensive first halves. A lot of times, as bad as Indiana was defensively, they would play pretty well in the first half, and in the second half, completely collapse. Well, tonight, that didn't happen. I don't remember the exact number, but Indiana held Creighton to somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.82 points per possession in the first half, and Creighton finished the game scoring only 0.886 points per possession, and they had to score a couple buckets late during garbage time to get it up to there. So it was a very consistent defensive performance by Indiana from beginning to end. Obviously not perfect. Indiana's still not great defending the pick and rolls, that kind of thing, but so much better. And if we're looking for progress defensively, we saw it tonight. Now, when you look for specific reasons why there was progress, look no further than the big man in the middle, Thomas Bryant. And this, to me, is my favorite stat of the entire night. Thomas Bryant played 27 minutes. He had 4 blocked shots. He only had 1 foul. And in the second half, at the beginning of the second half, where Indiana typically has a bit of a lull, and we did tonight, the offense was not very good for the first 12 minutes of the second half. But defensively, we held it together because we kept playing hard and because Thomas Bryant erased some errors in containing dribble penetration with block shots. And on other ones where he didn't block the shot, he altered the shot. And that's something that we did not have last year. And clearly Thomas, is making progress here against the best team he's played, defending without fouling. We could spend the whole show talking about Thomas Bryant and what he brings to the team, but I thought that was so big for Indiana in maintaining their defense from the first half to the second, because last year we saw Indiana struggle to do that so much. And that, we know, if Indiana can do that, if they have a guy down low who can erase errors containing dribble penetration, that could make all the difference for this team and give them a legitimate shot at hanging a 6th banner, so it makes for a perfect banner moment. All right. I will turn it over now to my co-hosts, get their opening thoughts on tonight's IU victory. And we have to start with Mr. Ryan Phillips, who debuts his new long-awaited computer at the end of the season. We're going to be wondering what new addition was more valuable to Indiana this year, Thomas Bryant or Ryan Phillips' computer.
I think Creighton's going to hang a banner for the computer, potentially. I look forward to that.
I'd settle for a big head in the student section, but
it's funny because it's been like 9 months since I've needed one, so I just want to...
Feels like it's been 5 years, but go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, for your tweets of support about my computer. More like, get your damn computer already. Tired of turning the volume up all the way. Anyway, on to basketball. I think, the one thing that stood out to me, of course, was Thomas Bryant. I just thought he was fantastic. And I remember saying last year when he committed how big a commitment it was, because it's going to make up for so many mistakes defensively. Just even if the guy isn't good defensively, if he's that big, the opposing offense has to worry about him. And so, he was just huge tonight. Offensively, we know what he can do. 17 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 4 blocks, only 1 turnover for how much he was possessing the ball. I just thought that was huge, that he's not making typical freshman mistakes. I'm sure he will at some point, and I'm sure we'll all overreact to it, but for now, he just seems very mature, seems like he knows what he's doing, and he's just impressive. In every facet of the game, he's impressive. I don't think he's a lights-out, all-world defender, but just being there and being involved defensively changes the dynamic for this team so much that, you've got times where, and it happened tonight, the guy drove in, and I marked this down, but I can't find it on my sheet. He drove in, and Bryant was there. Bryant didn't step up. Bryant was still on his guy, but the guard knew he couldn't shoot it because Bryant was right there. So he kind of drove around in a circle. He just threw up a terrible shot. Because last year you could do that on this team. You could just drive right in. There was nobody there. And this year there's a presence there. And he's smart enough not to leave his man, but he's also aware enough to be close to where he could alter the shot. The one thing I did say about him that is insanely impressive versus other great big men we've had, like Zeller and Noah Vonleh, is the way he posts up makes it so much easier for guards to find him. He posts up high, he widens his body, he squares up to the guy who's passing to him, whereas Zeller and Vonleh would start much lower on the block, and it made it harder to make an entry pass. So he just has a few innate senses about the game, and he just knows how to play on this level, and it's impressive seeing that only 3 games into his freshman year. So he was the big deal tonight, I think. I think everybody saw that, and Thomas Bryant is the real deal, and he's as good as advertised.
Andy, your bottom's line on tonight's IU victory.
Yeah, I thought a lot of guys obviously played well in a game like this, but I was really impressed with James Blackman Jr. I thought this was certainly his best game of the season, and maybe one of his best, considering the competition. Again, I'm not sure we all have a great idea of how good Creighton's going to be when it's all said and done, but a lot of his big games last year came against the preseason, against a lot of the lower competition. I thought tonight he did a really good job of getting his own shot, but also really looking to get other guys involved. There were a number of times when he found Troy along the baseline. I think 3 of his 4 assists came on those kind of plays. I thought he did a really good job there, grabbed 4 offensive rebounds, 7 rebounds in total, and that was, again, something that was so huge for him early in his freshman season, and then seems like it's really picked up these last couple games. And then he scored 19 points, so it's not as if he didn't, strike that balance of getting other guys involved. Hit 4 of 6 threes. And all that in 25 minutes of work, at least based on the box score that I'm looking at. So I thought it was one of his better games. Didn't really force the action. I know one or maybe both of you talked about how his game had really matured as he got, as he's getting into his sophomore season. And I think he was pretty quiet in that first game, if I remember correctly. But he's really turned that around in the last 2, and I thought was one of the guys who made a really big difference tonight. Defensively, I think he's still a work in progress, but I thought his just overall contributions to a number of different aspects of the game and really being under control and being able to pick his spots when it was the right time to shoot, when it was the right time to pass. I was really impressed with him tonight.
Dan Dockich just tweeted, if you whine about IUBB tomorrow on the show, you will be banned. Producer Kyle has an app that won't allow your radio to play. That's funny. If you can whine about Indiana after this performance, I don't know what to tell you. Now, I think
the last 2 performances.
I know.
That's about as good as you can play. Last game was about as good as you can play offensively, and then tonight there were lulls, and that's going to happen when you're up big. Had this been a tightly contested game, you probably wouldn't see those lulls.
Yeah, okay, but hold on. Okay, but hold that thought, because there were lulls, but I think this is a positive, not the kind of lulls that we've seen, right? Because I always track how Indiana does in between the TV timeouts. And there were only 3 sequences that Indiana, well, not counting the last one, but we don't count that one because it was like 2.5 minutes and a lot of the bench guys were in. But outside of that one, there were only 3 that Indiana didn't win outright. 2 of them they tied and 1 they lost by 1. And this has been a team that has struggled because a couple bad possessions has snowballed and they'll lose, the other team will go on a run. And that didn't happen. And I thought that was really impressive because this Creighton team's good enough on offense to go on a run on you.
Yeah, that was the thing. Is Creighton never really went on a run. They traded baskets some. They might get a 5-0, 4-0 run, but they didn't go on a sustained run, and that was the key. And I think a lot of that had to do with, as they were saying on the broadcast, a guy like Bryant being in the back. The other team's not getting easy buckets. I mean, they hustle. The team, to their credit, hustles too. They get back on defense. Even if they play terrible defense once they're there, they get back, and they dive after loose balls. And So I think that you're right. I think that was the thing, is there were lulls, but they didn't, in those lulls, allow the opponent to take advantage of them.
Yeah. Now, one guy we have to talk about right now is Yogi, because I have decided that we are not going to take Yogi for granted, and when he has a really good game, just because other guys play well, wait until 45 minutes into the show and be like, hey, we should mention Yogi. He did his usual thing where he's the best player on the floor and, showed how great an all-around game he has. Yogi finished with 15 points, 6 assists, 9 rebounds, 2 steals. 2 of his rebounds were offensive, and he is attacking the offensive glass like we haven't seen from him. He did have 3 turnovers, wasn't especially efficient, going 6 of 14 from the field, and Seth Davis probably said at least 25 times that he wishes Yogi shot more free throws, and that's maybe one concern that we'll talk about. But what I really want to mention about Yogi, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on it, is I'm seeing a different level of joy from Yogi. Like, he looks like he's having more fun doing the hard work this year. Like, he's really crashing the glass. He's diving for loose balls. He's playing harder on defense, and he seems to be having a lot of fun doing it. You saw him. I think he dove for a loose ball, and then he's getting up and doing his head bobbing thing and just having fun. And we've seen some of that from him, but I just feel like it's a different level. And I think when you've got your clear leader, because he's your senior, he's your point guard, he's your best player, and perhaps your most talented overall player in Thomas Bryant, playing with that kind of enthusiasm and intensity, I mean, even if other guys only come up to 75% of that level, it's going to make a difference. And I think that's really making a huge difference for this team. And I think it's a big hat tip to Yogi for leading in that way through these first few games. Andy, your thoughts on Yogi? I mean, obviously, it's just another great performance from him. We just want to be careful we don't take him for granted here during his last season.
It's funny you say that, because I was, when they, at the end of the game, talked about how, he was the hardest working, whatever the player of the game thing was at the end, and it was like, oh, he's got, 9 rebounds. I was like, he had 9 rebounds, and he had, I knew he had scored, a decent number of points, 15 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, and it was just kind of like, like you said, even during the game, while you're obviously watching him, it's exciting to watch with the ball in his hands. I think it is easy to kind of take him for granted. It's funny that you mentioned that. I think we've done that on the show. Really, almost all of the shows waited until the end to be like, oh yeah, he's still really good. That's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was funny that even the 9 rebounds, it seemed kind of quiet, but I think it just speaks to his overall engagement and activity level in what he's doing. But I do agree with you about the things. He had a huge smile on his face after he got called for a foul that he didn't really agree with, and thought he had played good defense, knocked the ball away. But I think it's pretty easy, I would guess, on this team to enjoy yourself with the way they're playing offensively, particularly in the first half. But I do think that's kind of great to see, because I don't know that a lot of that personality has come out with him. I think, obviously his freshman year, he's got all those veteran guys around. You're probably not too apt to, show a ton of emotion or do some of those things. I think it's just kind of another facet of him, maturing over the course of his career at IU. But he's been just outstanding. And I get Seth Davis's point. I think that's probably a fair point about the entire team. I think they only shot 9 free throws tonight, but I think a lot of that was the second half. The first half, I thought they attacked inside pretty well. A lot of times they're attacking inside but not going to the rim and kicking it out for an open three-pointer. So I think that's something. Again, I think we mentioned this after the last show, something to watch, but nothing that about Yogi or anybody else really concerns me. I think when things get tight and IU needs a bucket, he's shown that he's going to go to the basket and try to get one, and I think the fouls will come in spots where they're needed.
Yeah, Ryan, I want to get your thoughts on that. I mean, Indiana only shoots 9 free throws. They make 6 of them. The other kind of concerning stat, if you're looking for any concerns from this game, is 18 turnovers, which is, 22.9%. We'd like to get that lower. Concerned at all about that? I mean, concerned especially about the lack of free throws that we've seen through the first 3 games?
I think it's hard to draw any conclusions just because of how early it is. And when a team plays, especially about the turnovers, when a team plays this fast, you're going to have turnovers. There's no question. And that percentage
but it's the percentage that's concerning.
No, and the percentage is high. But I think that a lot of times when you do play that fast, you get into a mode where you get loose. So that'll drive the percentage up too, because you're just, going fast, turnover, come back, turnover. You've seen this team turn the ball over in bunches before. And in past years. And I think that happens when you play fast. I think that you just kind of get out of sync and then you hone back in. As far as that goes, I think there were 2 turnovers late and back-to-back possessions that with the backups in. I think there were a couple turnovers that were offensive fouls that weren't actually fouls. So I'm not as upset about that. The free throws, I mean, that's something that if in a few weeks when we're playing tighter games, if that's still a problem, then yeah, that's a concern because you want to get to the line, you want to drive up the foul count on the opposing team, you want to get guys in foul trouble. But right now it's not because they're not attacking. They're so much more athletic and so much more skilled than the guys they're playing. They're driving right by them, so you're not getting contested. You're getting very few contested plays at the rim and things like that. And you're getting a lot of it's early in the season, so you're getting a lot of loose ball, away from the ball fouls, and not getting them in the post and in the paint and places like that. So I think that IU's operating so quickly on offense that they're not getting to the line because when they do drive it in, they've already prepared to kick before they're getting go up to the rim, or when they go up on the rim, they've already beaten their man, so they're not going up for a contested shot. So. Yeah, in a couple weeks, if that's still an issue, we should be focusing on it. Right now, I'm not really too worried about it because they've been so dominant in other areas.
A couple of quick points I want to make. Number one, I want to thank longtime audience member C.R. Williamson for sending me my IU 2015-16 team poster, which is now in my background. Thank you very much for sending that to me. Really appreciate it. And also, if you guys want to interact with the show, the best way to do it is on the chat. And if you go to assemblycall.com/live, or if clearly you're probably watching us from that page right now. If you're on mobile, scroll down. If you're on your desktop, look to the right. The chat is right there. To access it, all you need is a free membership to the Assembly Call, which you can get at assemblycall.com/register. It takes 10 seconds to fill out your information. You get access to the live chat, to the halftime report, to the 50 Greatest Hoosiers content series, which is complete, but we still have a lot more to add to it, actually, some enhancements to make. So make sure that you get your free Assembly Call membership and join us for the live chat because some of our longest-term audience members, Trenton and Brian and Megan, are in there moderating, and we're really looking for that to grow as the season goes on because we like seeing what you guys have to say about the games while we're talking, and we can answer your questions that way on the show. All right, so I want to talk about the one, I guess, kind of glare. I don't know if I'd call it a negative, but just kind of the one thing from this game that really stood out to me is, kind of needing some improvement, and that's Troy. And before the game, he was my pick to click. I thought he would have a big game, and he certainly had some big moments. The rebound jam was incredible, and I thought it was hilarious that Nick Zeisloff shot the ball, saw what was about to happen, and then just turned around and didn't even watch Troy complete the dunk, but started celebrating, which was awesome. But I thought what we saw from Troy tonight was a lot of good Troy and a lot of bad Troy. And I thought the good Troy was when he was operating the baseline. I thought he showed terrific awareness at when to cut to the basket to make himself available for passes. And his teammates did a really nice job of finding him. And he got some really high percentage looks that way. But I thought when Troy initiated the offense, there were times that he just put his head down and a couple times he found open shooters, and that was good. But when he put his head down and was determined that he was going to get a shot off, more often than not, it wasn't good. And it led to a couple of wild shots. Troy was only 6 of 13 from the field, and he's typically a higher percentage guy than that when he's playing well. Had 4 turnovers. There was a breakaway that I thought he should have just kicked it up to Yogi for the easy layup rather than trying to make the spectacular play. And I guess, and someone said that was selfish by Troy, and yes, I think that individual play was, but Troy isn't a selfish player. I think, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, that he seems to be struggling a little bit. I know he wants to show his new shot. He wants to show that he can create shots and make spectacular plays. I think through the first 3 games, he's not letting the offense come to him quite as much as even we saw last year when he was playing well. And he's forcing it a bit much. But when he plays within himself, and I know, Seth Davis talked about how effective he was operating, kind of leading the offense as the point, and he can be, but boy, he sure looked good working those baselines when the other guys were penetrating. And I just think if he can rein himself in a little bit, and if Coach Crean can rein him in a little bit, he'll be able to let the positives that he brings to the game outweigh the negatives. Because I thought tonight offensively, I thought he was a net negative. I thought he made more mistakes than he brought to the game. And Troy's better than that. We've seen him be better than that. I just wonder if he's even struggling a little bit with his new role, with wanting to showcase some new things rather than doing, what he's really good at. And that'll be something to watch for as the season goes on. He was the one guy tonight that I didn't think brought his A game, and it really just came down to decisions. Love to get both your guys' thoughts on him. Andy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's funny. I think there are times it feels like when and maybe that's just from having watched him for a few years, like you can kind of see where things are going before they happen. And there were a couple times that on pick and roll plays, he made a nice, toward the end of the game, made a nice dish to Brian. I think had another one in the first half as well. But in those instances, like you could almost tell that he had made up his mind that he was gonna pass, because the one particularly toward the end of the game, he probably had a little bit of a lane to go, but he kind of knew that he wanted to. That he wanted to go to Bryant. He made a good play on that in the first half. But then there are other times when, like you said, you see him put his head down, and you kind of know, like, well, here comes a wild shot or things like that. And so, it's just funny that on similar plays you can still watch him and get a good idea of how things are going to end up. But yeah, it was definitely some good with some bad. I felt like the get off my lawn guy when he's going down on that play, because I'm looking at it going like throw it ahead to Yogi, and in his head he's just like processing, like a Rolodex of what kind of spectacular dunk I'm going to do, and you could kind of like see him like flipping through like I'm going to try this, and then the guy who later revealed himself to be Vlade Divac with a NBA level flop, chased him down and blocked the shot. But I thought it was a kind of mixed bag from him. I do think there's probably a little bit of that where, especially in these games, and these are games where it's really hard to gauge. It's like, does some of that come from the game's kind of out of hand, and it feels more like a time to showcase different things, or you're doing things up 20 that you wouldn't do when you're up 4. And there just haven't been a lot of times where IU's been up 4 so far, and maybe that's what we'll see in Maui, whether he. It's something where he's like experimenting in the lab at some point when you're up 20 and doing things you might not do. And I think that's what's somewhat the challenge of the games and how IU's played this year, that you don't have a good feel for that. But I do see some of that, and you watch him and try to figure out what he might do from possession to possession. But I do think there are times when it gets a little predictable, based on his first couple dribbles and even just watching his head is where he's looking and what he's going to do.
Mr. Phillips.
Yeah, I think that with Troy, he's just sort of become known as like this highlight reel guy, and I think that he's always looking to do something, not necessarily selfishly. I don't think, as you said, I don't think he's a selfish player. I think that his instinct is, let's do something awesome, get the crowd into it, whatever. And so I think that sometimes takes away from when you need to make the solid play. Hopefully that's something that, he's a little older this year, maybe a little more mature. Hopefully he realizes that sometimes the solid play is better than the spectacular play. It may not show up on a highlight reel, but it's, something that will help the team win. I agree a little bit that, in a big game like this, these guys are all looking to show off for each other and have dunks and have fun and do that kind of stuff. Oh, God, Andy.
Bottom says jokes tonight, man.
Yeah. I wish you guys could see the chat that goes on while we're doing these shows, which will never be published. Yeah, Andy's being funny in the chat. But anyway, I think that Troy is just a guy who wants to do some crazy, fun stuff. And I think that in a game like this, that's what you wind up getting is maybe huge. You wind up seeing like dunks that brick and things like that, and you only see those in these big, blowout type games. So I think that has a lot to do with it, and we've seen that early on. We'll see.
All right, so we've got some great questions coming in from the chat. Megan, thank you for tweeting these to me. Sometimes I have to close the chat window because there's just too much going on my computer and it overheats. But Megan does a great job of tweeting these out. So, Ryan, I want to go to you first with this question. And this is actually a simple statement. This comes from Matt. Bryant is better than Zeller. Discuss.
I was actually thinking about that after the first half, and that is a really hard determination to make. They're such different players. I know they both play in the post, but they're so different. I'm going to try not to punt on this question. I'm going to try and answer it. Thomas is more physical as a freshman. He has better offensive instincts, I think, initially. He has better offensive instincts as a post player. Cody was a better all-around basketball player, I think. He could dribble. He was a better passer. He was better on the perimeter with the ball. But I think that as a strictly a post player, I do think Brian is better offensively. Defensively, right now at this point, I think they're about even. Zeller became a much better defensive player during his freshman year as it went along, but at the same point now, I think they're pretty even. Overall, I mean, they're both 5-star All-American type guys, so you can't really split hairs there, like who's better. I don't know, but I think that offensively as a post player, Thomas Bryant is better right now.
Can I reveal something? I said this on the halftime report. As I was watching Thomas Bryant tonight, I kept seeing Patrick Ewing. Anybody else see that? Just the way that he posts, the way that he handles the ball. Like, I'm not saying he's that good, but I don't know. There was something about him that I kept thinking, and AJ Moye too, because of the enthusiasm, but the way he plays in the post, Ewing.
No, I mean, that's not a terrible comparison. I think that Ewing often tried to go for the shot more than going straight to the hoop like Bryant does, but if you're looking at a body and you're looking at their movement ability at that size, that's a very good comparison. I think that Ewing loved to go over his left shoulder. He loved to catch the ball in the right block and, throw up a hook or something like that. I don't see that from Bryant. I see him as, I want to get to the rim right now. But as far as their movement skills and their size and maturity for their age, I think that's a very fair comparison.
All right, so Dan is wondering, do you feel the starting lineup is better without Troy Williams, third guard, or Hartman faster? I don't. Troy is a starter. I think he needs to stay a starter. And I think right now what you have with the bench is spectacular, and I wouldn't mess with it. As I said in the halftime show, we have seen in every game this year, in the first half, Indiana's come out and played okay to start, and we get a huge burst from the bench when Robert Johnson and Colin Hartman come in, and it happened again tonight. It was 11-7 when we made the first substitution, putting in Johnson and Hartman. Indiana immediately went on a 15-3 run that built the rest of the lead. So I think that you'll see Bielfeldt and Hartman probably flip-flop some, and maybe you put a Robert Johnson in, if it's a very guard-heavy matchup. But I think right now what you have with that bench, and especially now Johnson didn't have a great game tonight, and obviously he's Andy's boy, so we're going to have to get some comments from Andy on Robert's struggles. But I think what we've seen from them, I wouldn't mess with that, and I think Troy is going to function better starting out playing with the starters. And Andy, feel free to chime in on that if you want to, but I want to send you this question from Brenda because she wonders what progress we'd like to see in Maui. Now we've played the two kind of cupcake games to start, stepped up the competition against Creighton, played really well. What's the next step now in terms of progress for this team?
Yeah, I think just to touch on the prior point, I would agree with you. I really like the way the bench is shaping up with the, largely it was an 8-man rotation tonight. Juwan Morgan and OG got in a little bit. And I think, that's something obviously I and many others have clamored for these last few years is to, tighten that up a little bit. And I think you're still seeing them make some, freshman mistakes. OG had a sequence that kind of showed you a little bit of everything from a freshman standpoint, got lost on defense, turned it over on offense, then gets a steal right back on the other end. And I thought, made some other plays after that. I think Morgan's still struggling a little bit. I think one of those guys probably works their way into maybe that 9th man type role, but I try to think back to, there were certainly some of the teams from a few years ago where Sheehy was, one of the first guys off the bench, and he was somebody that you felt like you knew what you were going to get. But the last time that an IU team had 3 guys coming off the bench that you felt really good about what they were going to bring to the table, in the same way that you do with, Johnson, Hartman, and Zeisloft, I think, it's been a while when I think back to these last few years. So I really like what's going on there. Those guys all seem to really do well watching the game play out and then inserting themselves into the flow. And I know that not everybody can do that. Some guys are really going to press coming in off the bench, and I think that's something that you'd probably worry about. I don't even know that it's a legitimate scenario that would present itself, but I think that's a case where you talk about Troy kind of pressing a little bit in some of these situations. I can see him coming in off the bench and really trying to assert himself. So I don't see that changing from that perspective. In terms of Maui, looking a little bit at Wake Forest, they just lost to Richmond. I think it was last night. Looks like it was. They've given up 73, 82, and 82 points, so they're 2-1. Haven't really beaten anybody of note, and have single-digit wins over University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and Bucknell. So I think you're going to see something probably similar to what you saw tonight. A lot of this looks a little bit like the numbers that Creighton put up in their first couple games against lesser opponents. Gave up a lot of points, scored a lot of points. but overall really going to probably struggle to consistently score well enough against a team like IU. They're missing one of their better players. Cody Miller McIntyre, I think is his name. He's out with a foot injury and not going to be back for that game. So they've got a pretty young team, as I recall. So guys with some experience from last year, but overall, pretty young. So I think, that game, I feel like probably expect a little bit of what you saw tonight. But I think getting past that, when you start to think about who the other opponents might be, that's where seeing how this team reacts to adversity, close games, how they defend against, deeper teams that can score with them. In particular, Vanderbilt has Damian Jones, a really good big guy. How they deal with somebody who's got a legitimate post presence, and how they continue to evolve defensively is probably the biggest thing that I'm looking for. I'm not sure that I don't think Wake Forest is going to be able to slow IU down from a defensive standpoint. I think even to a certain extent, Vanderbilt probably not, although they'll probably try to slow the game down a little bit. So we've talked a number of times the last few years about, can IU enforce the tempo that it wants to play on its opponents. So I think Vanderbilt will be a good challenge for that. And then, if they get to the final and end up playing Kansas, I think that'll be a really good matchup as well. You've got a team that athletically can match up pretty well with what IU has and how they respond. So I'm most interested in just how this team responds to a better competition and all the things that go with that in terms of closer games, more evenly matched athletes, and how they respond to that defensively. Because I think we've seen in some of these games there are some lulls. I know, Jared, like you said, it wasn't the way that manifested itself on the scoreboard tonight wasn't quite the same in terms of some of those lulls. But there definitely been times when it's tough for college kids to to maintain a level of interest when they're just beating up on somebody. And this game felt like it was over with 4 minutes to go in the first half. So in some tighter games, can they maintain that focus and efficiency all the way through?
Heck, we've had lulls just in this show when it's a blowout show. So I mean, I hear you. A couple great quotes coming out of the post game. Mike Miller quoting Thomas Bryant is saying, "The lion came out of me," which is great, and certainly we saw. Brody Miller of the IDS paraphrasing James Blackman saying how defense was instrumental to offense having the success it did. That coming from James Blackman Jr. certainly a good quote, a good sign, because we know that the defense is important for Indiana, especially for his progression. Ryan, real quick, I want to get your thoughts on Colin Hartman. He's played well. He's done some Colin Hartman things in the first couple games, but it hasn't really shown up in the stat sheet. And we know he's a guy who doesn't have to light up the stat sheet to have a big impact. But it's certainly nice when he does. And tonight, he had 6 points, he had an assist, he had 6 rebounds, 1 offensive rebound where he just came out of nowhere to get it. I thought a really solid performance from him, and it should have been more because he had 2 3-pointers that he made, but they were waved off for foul calls. But, I mean, the shots were within the flow of the offense. And so that was really nice to see because we know that he needs to get off the schneid. And so you look at his 0 for 2 from 3. That, to me, isn't an accurate reflection of how he actually played because he should have had 12 points and definitely his best performance of the night. And there were plenty more examples of him really being in good position on defense and just, again, leading by example, doing all the Colin Hartman things that we expect him to do.
Yeah, I think he was his usual reliable self. # Colin Hartman things, because I know you love that. But he just does those things you need a garbage man to do. He comes in, just is always in the right position, always moves the ball on offense, always in the exactly where he's supposed to be, makes really smart decisions with the basketball, makes really smart decisions with his cuts and with his screens, and he knows when to cut, when to screen, when to hedge on defense. I mean, he just is a very well-rounded player. And yeah, those 2 threes, I mean, that's heartbreaking because he still hasn't made one this year. And I think the guy just needs to see one go down, and not be whistled. And I think that he'll be fine and in the flow. But yeah, he's just such a solid all-around player to the point where, I mean, he's an interchangeable starter now. He could start over Bielefeld depending on the size of the opponent. And, I wouldn't have a problem putting him out there if another team has a stretch 4 or runs more of a 4-ish guard lineup. I wouldn't feel bad about having him on defending a guard at this point at all because he's not athletic enough to stay with a really good driving guard, but he's so smart that he makes up for it. And he's one of those guys that is quietly one of the more valuable players on the team because he can do everything and you can fit him in any role, and he'll play. It's like having a soccer player who can play defense, midfield, and forward, or he's just interchangeable, can do whatever you ask, and he's going to do it well.
Andy, Nick Zeisloft continues to dominate Indiana in points per shot. Had 12 points tonight on 6 field goal attempts. Of course, all of them were threes, and he went 4 of 6. He may break the Pomeroy scale for offensive efficiency. Now, he won't rank in the top because he doesn't use enough possessions, but if you remove that criteria, I mean, he's looking good. After a couple games where it looked like he kind of struggled to get into the flow, he's in the flow.
Yeah, I agree. Apparently, there's probably kids all over Indiana just slamming their hand in a car door or something to try to get their finger to to do that, because that seems to have been the magic elixir that got him going. But no, I think he's just, again, we talked a little about the fouling and getting the ball into the lane. There's a lot of good things happen when you get the ball into the lane, and Seth Davis brought this up a couple times during the game tonight. It isn't necessarily just that you score when you get the ball in the lane. It isn't necessarily that you feed a guy for a layup. Just the way that it draws the defense, and with this team and the guys that can drive the ball, having a guy like Zeisloft be able to come in and spot up and confidently make shots is just huge. And so he showed he could do that last year. I don't think anybody was too worried this year when he struggled a little bit out of the gate, but he's really picked that up. And I think just another guy that's got some experience and leadership and those kind of things. And again, I think when he was I think he started some at times last year. I don't think he's a guy who you need or want to play 25, 28 minutes a game, but he can most definitely give you a good 12, 15, 18 minutes if you need him, and knock down some shots and just give not even another dimension of the offense, because they've already got guys that can make threes, but just shooting the ball with a lot of confidence right now. And I think that's going to be key in Maui, because the thing that's hard about a tournament like that, in addition to the level of competition, is just that you're playing 3 games in 3 days. Some of them the turnaround's pretty fast, and so they're just going to have to be able to steal some minutes with guys and let these guys play. So having 3 guys that you feel really good about off the bench that can play 20 minutes if you need them to on a given night, I think is really important going into a tournament like that, and something that again, I just don't feel like IU basketball has had a whole lot of in recent years, where you've had multiple guys that you trust coming in off the bench in the way that I think all of us trust those 3.
Yeah, okay, so I've got a gripe with Tom Crean, and let me preface this by saying that I think
this is about Tim Priller, isn't it?
It is not about Tim Priller, but I do think Tim Priller he had a great moment in the game. Indiana, the ball was out of bounds when they had 7 seconds left, and you could see Tim Priller shouting to Coach Crean, 7 seconds, 7 seconds. So Priller staying engaged, providing value on the bench. Here's my gripe with Coach Crean. Again, I preface it by saying he's done a terrific job getting this team ready to play. We're seeing improvement on defense, which we needed to see, so plaudits all around. Why was Thomas Bryant playing with 2.5 minutes left? Or am I making too big a deal about this? I mean, this is a guy, he had a terrific night. He was clearly playing hard, playing with enthusiasm, but the guy's had a foot injury. The game is fairly well in hand, and I don't know, I just didn't see the need for him to be out there. It's the most nitty of nitpicks, or picky of nits, however you want to say that. But I'd have preferred to see Bryant sit the final 5-6 minutes of that game. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that part of it is that Bryant's a freshman, and they're trying to get him as much time as possible before he gets thrown to the Wolves next week. Yeah. They could very quickly. I mean, if Andy was talking about Wake Forest, and that I don't ever say a Maui game is an easy game, because you have to fly a long way to go out there to play a game in a tiny gym that makes you feel like you're back in high school. So anything can happen. But after Wake Forest, he's going to face 2 teams. No matter who wins or who loses, he's going to face 2 teams that are really good college basketball teams. And he's going to have to be ready. And I think that part of it was also to get his minutes up a little bit. They have been monitoring his minutes and slowly bringing him along. I don't know what his total was tonight, but they want to get it to a certain level.
27.
And then continue to move up towards 30 if they need him, and that kind of thing. So he's got to be ready to go 30 minutes in Maui. He really does, because we may need him. I mean, if we hopefully wind up playing a team like Kansas or UCLA, you're going to need a guy like him on the floor more. So I think that part of it is they're monitoring him really closely because of the foot injury. But at the same time, they've also got to work on building his minutes up. They knew those were going to be low-impact minutes, but at least he's on the floor running up and down, getting getting acclimated to being on the floor for that long. I agree in a sense that it kind of is counterintuitive to have him out there, but at the same time, they know what's going on with him physically better than we do, and I also believe that freshmen, it takes them a while to get up to that level, with that kind of intensity. So with that tournament coming up next week, I think it's pretty imperative to get him to the point where he can play 30 minutes a game.
One other interesting development real quick here before we head to our final thoughts, unless, Andy, you want to provide kind of a detailed scouting report on Wake Forest, but the other freshmen, OG and Juwan, it was pretty clear, OG was the first guy off the bench among those two, and it's pretty clear he is ahead of Juwan in the rotation, and it's validated by their play. I think it was another night where Juwan, again, a guy, especially once Emmett Holt was dismissed, that a lot of people thought, hey, this is a guy ready to play 10, 15 minutes, he's college ready, and he's really looked uncomfortable out there, and that's not rare for a freshman, believe me. I mean, obviously we've seen lots of freshmen who it takes them a while to get comfortable. Juwan, to me, has actually seemed to get less comfortable with each performance, and he really seems to be second-guessing himself now. At least that last time he was out there trying to make plays, but he was turning the ball over. And I kind of like the aggressive mindset despite the mistakes. Tonight, he really seemed tentative, and it just seems like he's probably going to need some kind of breakout performance, and by that I mean like a couple offensive rebounds and a putback, taking a charge, like something to kind of get him going, because I just feel like right now, he's not providing a lot of positives out there, and we know he's capable of more, and hopefully that'll happen sooner rather than later, because he's a guy Indiana's going to need as the season progresses. Andy, Ryan, either one of you guys want to take this?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Juwan specifically, I think OG is sort of a wild card because of his athleticism and his defensive ability. I think that, sorry, our chat, again, another one, they're making fun of me.
Sack up, Philip.
I got to deal with distraction. It's like shooting a free throw. But no, I think that OG can come in and impact a game right now because of his athleticism and his defensive ability. But Juwan is a guy who's going to need to get a little bigger. He's going to need to get used to going against guys with actual, college size, and it's going to take some time for him. But I do think that he can be an effective player this year. He's a freshman in his first 3 games. Obviously, hasn't looked great. But you got to give him time to develop, and you're right about that. He's a freshman. It could take time. But he's a guy that they may count on at some point this year, and so you just hope that he can slowly come along and slowly improve as it goes along. And a lot of times freshmen lose confidence. I didn't think he played particularly well in the last game, and I thought that carried over to this game as he was just sort of almost wild-eyed when he got the ball, trying to do something to erase the memory of that. And that's not what you do. Each game's different. Each game is a fresh slate. He needs to really get a good performance and then slowly build on that.
Andy, any thoughts on the freshmen, or just kind of general thoughts on what you've seen from the substitutions and rotations so far through the first couple games, which I know is hard to judge, but
yeah, I saw the same thing you did with Juwan. It definitely felt like you can kind of see the wheels turning in his head as he's out there tonight, in particular, where he's just trying to make something happen. There was even a drive later in the game that I found myself thinking, like, just let him get to the basket and make a shot. Like, that would just be, I think, really big for his confidence. So I think that's something that all freshmen are going to go through, that kind of realization of how things are now versus what you experienced in high school, and I think it's something that he'll work through. And the good thing is that I think, in contrast to some freshmen that have been brought in past years, IU doesn't need him to do a lot, so there's not a lot of in-game pressure. I think the pressure that he's putting on is probably internal and things that he's trying to do to make plays, but I do feel like there's going to be a time this year when they need him, but I don't know that there's a ton of that kind of pressure on him. So I think that's good for him, and something, again, that because of having those other bench guys and bringing in a guy like Bielfeldt who's got some experience, you don't thrust a lot of that upon these guys early on. So I definitely think that based on how they played, didn't shock me that OG was the first one of those two off the bench tonight, but I think that's probably a situation where they're going to be ebbs and flows between the two of them over the course of the year, and we'll go from there. So felt like, from a lineup perspective, I'll be interested to see if the numbers actually bear this out when I do it later, but definitely felt like the second half there was some pretty long stretches where guys played together, and it was a pretty tight group in this game of those core 8 guys playing together, and you saw that expand a little bit when OG and Morgan came in. But in general, I thought the rotation itself, now how many lineups that translates to, I don't know, but certainly the rotation itself felt like it had tightened up a little bit, and I think that's something that we'll probably see change a little bit going to Maui. Like I said before, you're gonna have a few where you're going to try to steal a couple extra minutes with some of these guys. So I wouldn't be shocked if, particularly in that first game against Wake Forest, tries to, steal a few minutes with the guys here and there. At least the one I'm looking at, OG played 6 minutes, Morgan played 5, and other than that, it was in large part those kind of core 8 guys, and even Robert Johnson only played 11 minutes. I thought just to kind of bring it back to that, I know you mentioned that earlier, I thought the fouls early for him kind of took him out of the flow of things. I thought at least one of those fouls was a little, if not a lot, questionable. But I think the fouls really, kind of got him out of the game. But I didn't really feel like he pressed either when he did get back in. But certainly didn't allow him to get into the flow of things as he did before. So couple points, couple assists, but overall kind of an off night for him. Clearly saving big performances for the games in Maui.
Yes. Hey, Ryan, real quick, let me send this to you. We got another question from the chat from Matt about James Blackman Jr., and Andy touched on James earlier. But Matt, talking about how he seems to be in a different zone this year all around. Defense a little bit better, offensive confidence up, which, kind of seems like he lost some of that and got out of sorts at the end of last year. Any quick comments on James? I know you've mentioned in some past shows that, it just looks like he's slowed down a little bit, and seems to be moving with more purpose and doing a better job on offense. Any thoughts on his overall game before we move on?
Yeah, I've said it a few times. I've said it on Twitter too. I just think he looks more mature in general on offense. I think his defense is still James Blackman Jr. defense, which isn't great. But I do think there's more effort there behind it. Offensively, last year it felt like it was almost like he was playing in his own one-on-one game. Like when he got the ball, it was, he had to figure out a way to score. He's either going to shoot or he's going to drive. It was one of the two, and there was no in between. And now it feels like he's actually bought into the team concept. He understands offense and what he can do within the offense that doesn't necessarily center on him. He knows that if he drives to a certain area, a guy's going to be here, a guy's going to be there, people will be open, and also that when he drives, other people are going to come to him. And that, when those guys come, somebody's going to be open. It's not just, oh, well, now I've got to score over 2 guys. And I also think that occasionally you see him gun a 3 that maybe is guarded, but he's such a good shooter that you're okay with that sometimes. You don't want him doing it on every shot, on every trip down the court, but occasionally, look, if he's isolated a one-on-one on a guy and he thinks he can get his shot off, I'm all for it. So yeah, I just think he's in general more mature, more confident. One of the problems last year was when he did go to the basket, he was incredibly soft and got his shot blocked a lot. And that, for a guy like him who is just an outstanding shooter, he can't have that part of his game negated, the driving part, because then guys can just play him to shoot. So he's added some stuff to his game. He can drive. He can pull up midway. I think that he's really rounded out his offensive game. It's not perfect, but it is much better, much more mature, and I just think he's a more sound player in general. He's clearly taken the advice that NBA scouts gave him last year and put it to work, and you're seeing that on the floor now, and I think he's only going to get better. I mean, with how dangerous he is, he's only going to get better.
For what it's worth, tweet from Dan Dockich that says, blasphemy coming, Thomas Bryant's a better prospect than Cody Zeller, great look and stroke and motor. I bring this up only to say this. Saying great things about Thomas Bryant is not a knock on Cody Zeller. It's extreme praise for Thomas Bryant. Like, I think, again, we have to see what he does against better competition, but I think he's exceeded even the lofty expectations that we had with his all-around game and his skill level. And so, I mean, Cody is beloved, and clearly he has skins on the wall where Thomas doesn't yet, but it's just, early returns, early observations. Again, it's not a knock on Cody, who is, one of the great players, even in only 2 years in IU history. Just shows you how good Thomas Bryant is.
Yeah, and I would just want to echo that, is that, these are 2 5-star All-American type guys, so comparing them is comparing 2 great things. And I just want to say also that by praising Thomas Bryant, I think he is one of the few people that will not get a big head. He just doesn't seem like that kind of kid. like, he's going to be the kind of kid where, oh man, now I got to live up to that. It's not going to be, yeah, I'm great. And I just love his personality, and that elevates him to another level, I think. And yeah, it's fantastic. He's a phenomenal player, and we are lucky to get to watch him.
It's similar to how we can continue to praise Andy for being the #1 bracketologist, but we know that he'll continue working just as hard on those brackets because he loves basketball and he knows a little something about every team, which is the perfect segue to him telling us about Wake Forest.
Yeah, so just looking over the Pomeroy numbers, I think they were typically a team picked in the kind of lower portion of the ACC. I think usually around 10th in a lot of the things that I looked at, which is not terrible since a lot of people have 8 or so teams from the ACC get into the tournament. But I think they were by pretty much everything I saw on the outside looking in from an NCAA tournament perspective, but have gotten a lot better with Danny Manning there as the coach, and I think are building in the right direction. Like I said before, they really, level of competition-wise, beat up on a couple cupcakes, lost to Richmond at home in that game, and so their Pomeroy numbers, at least offensively, they check out pretty well. They're 40th at least as of the time that I'm looking at this in adjusted offensive efficiency. A lot of that has to do with getting to the free throw line a lot and doing really well on the offensive glass. Now I think some of their success on the offensive glass is likely due to who they were playing, and that's one thing that IU tonight didn't allow an offensive rebound until the second half, which is the second of these 3 games where they've done that. So I don't know how much of that was IU tonight versus how Creighton was playing. They played a little bit like Wisconsin has done at times, where they really just simply didn't send anybody to the offensive glass once a shot went up because they didn't want to get beat on a run out going the other way. So it doesn't seem like Wake Forest is going to be in the same boat. So again, maybe able to get some transition baskets if IU can continue to control the glass. So that's really where they've excelled. They've had some turnover issues. It looks like, at least based on these numbers, and have not shot the 3 very well at all. They're under 30% for the year, based on what they've done defensively. Kind of the same story. They've done well on the defensive glass, but haven't forced a lot of turnovers, which that's probably a good thing based on some of what we've seen from IU, but really haven't slowed anybody down, allowing opponents to shoot over 40% from three-point range. You can argue that some of that is luck, but I would also argue that that probably means you're leaving people open a good chunk of the time. So again, I think a little bit like Creighton, where you see that they've put up some good offensive numbers against what appears to be lesser competition, and so this will really be their first test against a good team. I think one that IU should do pretty well in. I think based on what I looked at, IU about a 10-point favorite on the Pomeroy projections, with about an 80% chance of victory. So should be one that IU should win and be able to move on. In all likelihood, if they do, they would play Vanderbilt, who is playing St. John's, who is getting beat by double digits against Rutgers earlier tonight. So I think that tells you pretty much all you need to know about St. John's, and that certainly Vanderbilt would appear to be the second-round opponent for IU if they do win on Monday.
That was an excellent job of staying focused there, Andy. I'm pretty sure that we can rate how good and fun an Indiana team is by the jocularity of our in-show chat.
It's fine. I like that you did this. See, I don't even look at it during the show, but and then Ryan comes out and tries to play the victim like we're attempting to distract him, when it was all in response to comments that he had initiated. And so that's fine.
I never said I wasn't a hypocrite. I don't know where you're getting that.
I never said you didn't. So that's fine. So no, I'm good. We'll this is fine. So I just don't really pay attention.
Folks at home, I just want to let you know the fact that Andy gave you that analysis and remained focused
is was incredible.
Because what we said was really funny.
Says I'll read it later. I'll read it after the show, and then I'll get a good chuckle out of it, I'm sure.
Megan has an important question. Do you think Dan is listening? Is Dan Doggett responding to a comment on the assembly call? Highly doubt it. But we'd love, Dan, if you ever want to come on the show, we'd love to have you. We really would. Because we do respect your analysis, because you know more about basketball than we do, for sure. So let's move on. I think it's time to close things up. A quick programming note before we get into final thoughts. Obviously, we have 3 games in Maui next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We are going to do our best to bring you shows each day, or each game, because it's what we do. Now, I will say, one of the 3 people on this panel scheduled an important event for this week. One of the three people on this panel is getting married on Wednesday. Yes, a diehard IU fan who hosts a postgame show scheduled a wedding the week of the Maui Invitational. We will not reveal who that is because it's not important, but, you know, being down to only...
But my wife is going to be super pissed if it's me, though. Just to be...
Yeah.
And I'm going to be in the arena at the game, so...
Which is going to make your nuptials beautiful,
He's gonna
frankly.
Be pissed.
Yeah.
My unnamed fiance is going to be really pissed.
Yeah. So, but Ryan will be there. So we're going to bring you coverage, and we hope it's a post-game show after each game. But it's going to kind of depend because Andy's going to have a different Wi-Fi situation, and we got people all over the place. It's the holidays. But Ryan will be doing some tweeting from the Assembly Call account, possibly some periscoping. We should have a post-game show each game, and we'll try to let you know beforehand if that'll happen. But just so you know, things might be a little bit different. We'll still be sending out the post-game emails. Will's going to handle that. So as much as possible, we'll try and keep our schedule because our goal is to be here after every single game for you guys. I'm going to take those couple of days off because I am getting married, and it would be bad form to run right from the ceremony to doing the post-game show, not only because I won't have been able to watch the game live, but also because the dirty looks that I would get from my wonderful future wife and my family would understand, but her family would look at me like I'm crazy. So we don't want to.
The woman's already a saint. Don't put her through anything else.
She is. She really is, and I'm very lucky. So, but just so you know, but again, we'll keep you updated on all of that as we go through the week. All right, let's go to some final thoughts, and so we don't cause a mutiny in the chat. This is like making sure that you throw your temperamental receiver the ball. We'll go to Ryan first for his final thought.
First of all, just to remind everybody, as Jared said, I will be in Maui. Follow the Assembly Call Twitter account during IU games. I'll be tweeting from that. If you want to know anything else about the tournament that's going on, look right down here. Follow that Twitter account. For those on the podcast, that is at Rumors and Rants. I will be there all week. I will be tweeting behind-the-scenes stuff that will not show up on TV, whatever is going on, some pictures, and possibly doing a Periscope or something like that. I'll try and get you as much information as I can while I'm there that I can legally do without them throwing me out because I really don't want to get thrown out of that arena.
Yeah.
Because they never let me back in again. But my final thought: congratulations to our host and the chief who runs this whole thing, Jared Morris, because I may not be back on here until then. I'm very happy for you and Heather, and
thank you.
Really pissed that you didn't invite me, jerk. I wouldn't have come, but at least I could have had the invitation. I mean, I'm going to be in Maui. I'm not going to your wedding. But no, just congratulations to both of them. Jared he's the heart and soul of this show. He's been it for now 5 seasons, and I think Andy and I are both, ecstatically happy for him, and I know all our fans are as well. As for the Hoosiers, it's going to be fun out in Maui. That's a hell of a tournament. I think it's the best preseason tournament every year, the most well-run. Every game is going to be televised, so that you have no excuses for not watching. And you'll see me on TV because I'll be sitting in press row and sitting on the side taking pictures and everything. So if you miss me on the post-game show, you'll see me there. So yeah, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody because I may not be on here until then. So Jared, we wish you the best, buddy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Andy, your final thoughts.
Well, I'm super boring. I'm not getting married. I'm not going to Maui. Just going to Northeast Ohio for Thanksgiving. So, no, I will. Definitely at this point, like Jared said, we'll definitely do a show Monday. I should be able to host on Tuesday before we head out, and Wednesday is probably the one that will be up in the air. But like he said, we'll keep everybody posted. So I would echo Ryan's comments about Jared. So congratulations and best of luck with that. You're making a smart choice by not getting things off on the wrong foot by trying to watch a basketball game. Now, if you're at other people's weddings and you're trying to watch a basketball game, totally acceptable. But
yes.
At your own, that's probably not a place you want to be. I'm just really excited about Maui. These games, while they're exciting and give us a chance to get a little bit more information about what this year's IU team is going to look like, I feel like the season really starts in earnest with this tournament for IU because it's going to be a level of competition that they've not really seen yet. I think like I said, Creighton, Wake Forest probably on a similar plane, but you get past those and ideally being able to play Vanderbilt and Kansas potentially if they get to the final, I think will really teach us a lot about this team. We certainly know how explosive the team is offensively, and these 3 games and even the 2 exhibitions have done absolutely nothing to change our opinion of that. But I think how they respond to this level of competition. There's a veteran team, a lot of things to like about it, and so for me, this is really our first glimpse into how good this team can really be. And I'm optimistic that they'll respond as much as I probably seem pessimistic and crotchety about some of the things during the games when I tweet about getting frustrated with some of the decisions and turnovers and sloppiness and all those kinds of things. But I do really have high hopes for this team. I think we all do, and I think this is going to be the first chance for everybody to see what that's all about, and hopefully a chance for people to just see how explosive this offense is. It's funny that a couple people were. I think Jason Williams tweeted out, something about comparing IU's offense to Golden State, and a lot of people were, giving him some backlash on that. And Justin Albers, tweeted it out as well and said clearly those people are not watching this team play, and that's probably true to a certain extent. I don't think anybody is equating this team on the whole to Golden State, but they are a hell of a lot of fun to watch when things are clicking on offense as they were during that ridiculous 15 consecutive made shot stretch against Austin Peay and during portions of that first half tonight. They're really enjoyable, so I think it's going to be exciting for people who aren't diehards like us and willing to pay to see this team, watch it stream on your computer for $10 a month, like we are to see it. That it'll be a chance for this team to really kind of show itself off to the country about how good they really are, and I'm really hoping that they rise to the occasion.
Absolutely. My final thought is simply, this team is fun. We know they're going to be fun. Even sometimes in losses, they can be fun because of the offense. But when they play like they did tonight, and it's dominant, and it's good on both ends, I mean, it goes from being fun to being really joyful watching this team. And it's an interesting distinction between fun and joy. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing from guys like Yogi, guys like Thomas Bryant with their play, and a lot of the other guys. But I think as fans, that's what we want, is those games like tonight where, we're on here happy and it's fun. That kind of performance, it's just wonderful. It's beautiful basketball on both ends, and we know that's what this team is capable of. And if we've even sounded a little critical through the first 4 games, it's simply because when you have a team with this much talent, this much experience, this much ability, you want to see them live up to it. And I think that's the most impressive and encouraging thing about tonight's performance, is the Hoosiers came really close to living up to that potential for 40 minutes, and it was a beautiful thing to see. It was a nice step up in competition, and now we get to take the next step up in competition in Maui, do it away from Assembly Hall, and we're going to find out a lot about this team. And whereas when the season started, I was, maybe had a little bit of trepidation heading into Maui, I'm excited. I'm ready to put us up against anybody. Let's see how we do. Let's hopefully go out there and win 3 games. If not, let's learn a lot, and let's get ready for the rest of the season. Because I think what we've seen is this team is ready to compete for championships. They're ready to be a Big Ten contender. They're ready to do good things, if they're healthy and if they keep progressing as we've seen. And I think that's the most encouraging thing of all through 3 games. So very excited. This was a great win. And as always, we're excited to talk with you about it. And we will be here after Wake Forest to talk about that game. And then, as we mentioned, we'll let you know about the schedule on Tuesday and Wednesday. So thank you very much for being here live tonight. We always appreciate it. Make sure you get on the email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe. That morning email comes out typically around 7:30 Eastern, the day after every game, chock full of IU analysis that we don't post on our blog. We only send it to you, our email subscribers. So get on that list, stay updated, and we will talk to you all Monday night after IU Wake Forest. Have a great night, everybody. Go Hoosiers.